first inaugural meeting of the Freedom Association in Scotland. I'm delighted to be appointed as a Freedom Association spokesman, and I certainly, even if my party might not be too keen on it, I'm certainly very sure that the two things go together well with my role as the Scottish Conservative and Unionist candidate in North Ayrshire and Arran. Sorry when you came in tonight there wasn't a sign outside directing you here. You might have ended up with the ABBA tribute night next door. As I say, by the time I'm finished, you might have wished you did end up with the ABBA tribute night next door. Some of what I'm about to talk about tonight is a little bit dry. It's got a lot of facts and figures. Hopefully that will be of an interest to you rather than the usual nonsense which we tend to get from politicians, which is just glib statements. So hopefully that will increase our awareness all round. There's an excellent presentation coming from the Saviour Regional Park campaign, who I've had a lot to do with in North Ayrshire at the Scottish Parliament election, to do with trying to protect Muirshiel Regional Park from over 320 wind turbines is the aim of developers to place there. Last thing before beginning is that the Erskine raffle next door, or slightly next to the bottle of champagne, is Erskine's autumn newsletter, which is straight off the presses. And I think it's on page 6, there's a photograph of myself with the class I had last year, and we ran a fun run for Erskine Hospital and raised nearly £5,000 from that, so that was, there's a little bit in there about it. Now, you might be wondering why we chose nuclear energy to be the theme this evening. Now, at the moment, I certainly think, and a lot of people are coming round to this view, that the biggest threat to the United Kingdom is not climate change, it's not even the credit crunch, but it is the looming gap which is emerging between the energy requirements we'll have in the next 5 to 20 years and the electrical generating capacity that is available. In the UK, we're very much in the unenviable position of facing multiple problems of, on the one hand, ageing nuclear power plants, the premature closing of coal stations due to the, Roger might touch on this later, the 2008 European Union Large Combustion Plant Directive, which means that coal stations have to close simply because of CO2 emissions. Also we have an underperforming renewables sector, all of which makes us increasingly dependent on imported gas supplies, mainly from Russia. This obviously makes us dependent on the volatility of the oil markets as well. Now, our whole economy, our health service, and even our very ability to transport and store our food is dependent upon a secure and continuous supply of electricity today. Add to this our over-dependency on foreign supplies of gas for domestic heating, and you can see the deep crisis that we're facing in the very near future. Now, our principal partners in the European Union have an average storage capacity for gas of around 56 days. Germany actually has 70 days storage, we only have 14. So if the gas supply is interrupted, we've got a very serious problem. Now, if I was Vladimir Putin, after the recent crisis in Georgia, I might be very tempted just to engineer some kind of mechanical problem on that pipeline at some point over the winter, just to make a little point to the West about how they handled the Georgian crisis. And I think it wouldn't surprise me at all if we do have an interruption to the supply over the winter. Now, the government's own energy white paper of 2008 is clear that nuclear stations must be built. This has been endorsed by Gordon Brown, perhaps one of his more sensible ideas, and not only for the replacement of existing plants, but actually to build additional plants as well. Now, I think it's fair to say that the Freedom Association, we believe that nuclear is essential to providing a secure, reliable baseload capacity in our generating systems. Together with clean coal and the appropriate use of renewables, nuclear energy can provide the security of supply that we require. Now, there was a report you might have noticed on the media during the week, a report called the Fells Report, which came out on Wednesday, which is why a lot of this I haven't had time to take on board without notes. Now, Ian Fells, Professor Ian Fells of Newcastle University, his private company Fells Associates, who it's fair to say are pro-nuclear, produced a very in-depth report with huge amounts of facts and figures, very accurate, which does paint a very depressing picture about the future of energy supply. The main conclusions of the Fells report are that we'll experience power cuts in about 5 years unless urgent action is taken now. Not the promised action about windmills, but new, different action. They also say that security of supply should take precedence over everything, including climate change and carbon emissions. I know Roger and I are both quite sceptical of the link between carbon emissions and the weather around the world, but even if we accept what the doommongers say, that carbon is the root of all evil, then it makes the necessity to address that even more important. Now there'll be a loss of 23 gigawatts. You might be wondering what a gigawatt is, but to give you an idea, Hunterston Power Station, which has 2 reactors, produces its maximum outputs just over 1 gigawatt. So there'll be a loss of 23 gigawatts of energy capacity between now and 2020. That's the equivalent of losing 20 Hunterston Bs. The aging nuclear reactors in the UK, they'll be offline, almost all of them by then. By 2023, only Sizewell B will remain, so there'll only be 1 nuclear reactor by then. Now, the 2008 BU directive will also force high CO2 producing coal stations to close. In Scotland, that'll mean 2, which we'll come on to later. So that amounts to at least another 12 Hunterstons will disappear out of the energy system here. And there'll be, unless we are willing to stand up and refuse to do Europe's bidding, that will have to be done. And I'm afraid that the government's performance over the last few years certainly doesn't encourage me that they'll be willing to stand up and say no to the bureaucrats in Brussels. Also, the report questions government subsidies for renewables such as wind power, which they say are totally failing to meet the targets that were set. So as Professor Fels points out, electricity is the lifeblood of civilization, and without it we spiral down into anarchy and barbarism. So that'll just cheer you up for this evening, Friday night. The need to highlight this alarming situation is clear, but why here and why by us? Well, clearly we cannot have a free and stable economy and society unless we have a regular supply of electricity. Everything comes from that. National security and the very independence of our British nation state depends upon it. Sadly, second reason is that Hunterston B nuclear station lies within the constituency, which I will once again be contesting in North Ayrshire and Arran at the next general election. Now, Hunterston provides over 500 direct jobs, at least 150 full-time subcontractors, and contributes over £33 million to the North Ayrshire economy. And together with Torness, generates around half of Scotland's electricity. Now, unlikely as a prospect may seem, I do hope one day to represent North Ayrshire and Arran as the MP there. The polls haven't been wonderful in the past, but Councillor Robert Barr, sitting here in the front, the second row, is a good example of how things are swinging away in North Ayrshire and Arran. And Gordon Allison here on my far left, but a place he wouldn't normally like to be. From his perspective, it's the far right. Was a councillor in Ardrossan North until Labour gerrymandered the boundaries with the new multi-member wards. Now basically in North Ayrshire and Arran, the sitting MP is against nuclear, the MSP is an SNP MSP. He sits on the fence and welcomes the extensions to the life but won't commit to the renewal, so no one is willing to come out and back nuclear there. And I think it is the duty of candidates to stand up for the things that existing elected members are refusing to do. Now the problem with the SNP is that many of their own MPs and MSPs are fully well aware of the folly of not going ahead with new nuclear, but they're scared of opening up the division that must exist within the party, and also incurring the wrath of their anti-nuclear wing and the anti-nuclear lobby. So once again, Alex Salmond is putting the interests of the SNP and independence above the interests of Scotland. So I do feel that we have an obligation and responsibility to take this matter seriously, and I'm sure as members of the public that who are facing our businesses, schools and hospitals being closed, or even the electricity supply being shut off for 4 or 5 hours a day, it's about time everyone started to take a bigger interest in the prospect of the energy crisis that looms. I also have to say, especially with the windmill presentation that's coming up, I hugely resent the subsidies that are being paid to wind farm companies. Now, literally billions of pounds are being handed over to these people. They make a profit whether they generate any electricity at all. It's really quite shocking. And as taxpayers and also as electricity bill payers, we are paying higher bills because of those wind farms. Now, it does